Chapter 1. A moon as red as the deepest rose hangs over the sky tonight. I look upon it with a sudden sadness and wonder if it will ever shine golden for me again. Will I see my love's face reflected on its surface for the remainder of all eternity? Will I be subjected to this fate until every iota of consciousness is scrubbed from my being? Still I wait. Still I miss her. Gods offer salvation, but it oft ends as a double-edged blade with a blood-red hilt. Legends speak of heroes who, in dire moments, sealed pacts in blood. These brave souls, whether warriors on the battlefield, star-crossed lovers yearning to reunite with their soulmate, or ailing children teetering on the brink of death, all found themselves at the precipice of existence. The tales weave a narrative of individuals forced to confront unimaginable trials, both physical and mental, to grasp the elusive opportunity to barter with the very forces of life and death. The gods, in their capricious wisdom, would occasionally entertain such exchanges, breathing life back into the souls who dared to bargain. Not everyone was destined to receive this divine gift, yet the possibility of a deal remained open to any who dared to tread where mortals and deities converged. My father had shared with me countless stories of these heroic feats, passed down through the ages. He spun tales of courageous champions and their quests to procure the favor of the gods, their journeys often connecting to his own youthful fascination with the divine. Amid the soft, flickering glow of the oil lamps, the stories felt more vivid, as if they lived and breathed in his room. The room itself exuded a sense of timelessness, its wooden walls imbued with the wisdom of generations. The oil lamps, with their gentle flames, cast enchanting, ever-moving shadows, like spectral dancers in a nocturnal reverie. In this chamber, the past and present converged, where stories mingled with reality, and the line between the two grew indistinct. His name was Abraxas. My father began one sullen night. He was the kind of hero you envision in your mind when you close your eyes. Radiant flaxen hair, build the size of a mountain, and a voice like a demon. He fought for the Empire in his early days, working his way up the chain of command. You see, Orleth is full of soldiers from here to there, but standing out, becoming an icon, becoming a hero, that's what Abraxas yearned for. He'd grown up in a family much larger than we have here. Siblings from wall to wall, it drove in him a deep desire to stand out. Did he kill lots of men? I had remembered asking. Stories about soldiers typically featured them going on sprees of mass destruction. I'm very sure he had, my father answered. He was a terror on the battlefield. Many considered him a one-man army. I'm sure if he had made it longer he would have become a warlord in his own right. But unfortunately, as strong as he may be, by himself he was still but a man. Even in that sort of state. Why did the Empire need such a man? I asked. My puzzled look must have amused him, as such a thing hadn't seemed anything less than obvious. Why such men like him? That is a question I wish I had a better answer for, my father said, his shoulders slumping. The world back then began with this. This determined how life communicated with one another before more complex speech developed in their individual communities. Armies were gathered roughly and soldiers fought simply to protect this. This was mine. This was yours. This was the origin of all that we know. How could you tell what this was yours or not? Surely some people thought that this could be more than one person's. An all-knowing smile gleamed on my father's face as the question escaped my lips, a string of thoughts that sprung from a child who had not yet learned the violence of the world. My curiosity, innocent and untainted by the harsh realities of the world, led me to seek understanding. Easy. You could tell if this was yours if you could kill anything who did not agree with you. Back when this was that, it was very easy to distinguish ownership. People very rarely had their this, whatever it ended up being, for very long. There usually was always someone stronger that came along, someone more deserving, more angry. That was long ago, and yet, he hung on the thought as if contemplating. My father's voice held the weight of experience, his gaze distant as he reflected on the turbulent past. It was a history that felt both distant and alarmingly close. It wasn't as long as I would like to think. There are still those of us that were alive when this was like that. They've been those of them that have best adapted to how things are now. Abraxas, now he had been one who had held on to his this for a very, very long time. Unfortunately, like the rest, his this was taken from him, and he begged the gods, of course being of the Empire, that request would have been sent directly to Oreos. That's the truth, God, right? I had asked, trying to remember. It was clear it was still difficult for me to get the names and associations down. My father shook his head. No, Oreos is the patron deity of light. While close, he would not dare claim dominion over truth from Nervos. Both of Orletha's gods would sooner see their empire in flames than lose their mantles to the other. Think of them like bitter lost loves. As I grappled with the intricate web of deities, their domains, and rivalries, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the complexity of it all. My father's patient explanations were my guide through this maze of divine figures. From what I remembered, Oros was very proud, often the source of the ignored requests from the Empire. The enigma of why people continued to put their faith in a god who seemed so distant weighed on my young mind. However, the unspoken rule of not questioning the patron gods remained firm, and I dared not voice my doubts. The air in the room seemed to thicken with the weight of tradition and devotion, a reminder that the gods, though capricious, held immense influence in the lives of the Empire's citizens. Oros let Abraxas' request hang in the clouds, unfulfilled. You see, it isn't just salvation from death that deals could be made, but that's what most of them tended to be. The gods don't deal in salvation for small matters, usually. What happened next? I asked. He went mad. Now, outsiders might have considered him mad before, and I wouldn't doubt that assertion, but he had only used his strength previously to protect what he claimed his. After his madness, though, he was nearly unstoppable. He began raging relentlessly, striking down any he could find. Those he used to call friends, his superiors, they all fell to the same crimson fury. I remember at this time how different this story felt to the others my father had told me. There was more detail in the motivation. The account was not from a third-hand experience. I looked up to my father with a growing sadness in my voice. Did you know Abraxas' father? My father's face was a patchwork of emotions as he spoke, his eyes filled with memories and unspoken regrets. The room around us felt like a cocoon of stories and secrets, the ancient oak walls bearing silent witness to a lifetime of experiences. The soft glow of the oil lamps seemed to flicker with the weight of my father's words, casting dancing shadows that emphasized the gravity of the tale. It's not an easy thing, existing. You know that? I listened intently, perched on my father's knee, my small frame feeling safe and cherished in his embrace. Sure, you're doing it now, but to continue to exist, that there is the difficult part. And often one must make difficult decisions, the kinds of decisions you'll have to live with for the rest of your life. That's the kind of decision that these people had to make in order to survive, in order to make it to now, where those kinds of decisions are no longer necessary. Abraxas for a long time made a lot of difficult decisions, but eventually some of those who knew him had to make some of their own. They were forced to in order to survive. Did you have to make any decisions like that? He knew what I had been asking, and up to this point had tried his hardest to say it indirectly. I was one of the few who helped bring Abraxas to the end of his rampage. It brought about a lot of misery thereafter, but ultimately it needed to be done. My father paused as he shifted and sat me up on his leg. That, I think, will be enough for now, Mal. We've already stayed up much too late past your bedtime. With a gentle touch, my father let me down from his lap, signaling the end of our conversation for the night. The room seemed to exhale, the weight of the stories lifting as we returned to our everyday life. The knowledge that my father had served in the Empire and faced challenging decisions was a heavy burden for a child to bear, but it was also a part of what made him who he was. I remember wanting to know more, wanting to know if it had anything to do with where Mom went. I had known so little at the time. My father served in Orleth for a time. The Empire had situated itself as a continental superpower in Aetharia's north. That wasn't where we lived then, where I had grown up. The Empire may as well have been a land of dreams for all I knew. Over time, the bedtime stories grew less and less frequent, and as such, time with my father was typically spent in the chores I did around the house to help him once he got home from work. After leaving the army and leaving the Empire, my father and mother settled down to the neighboring kingdom of Khadenite, a city sustained in the sky to the Empire's south. He had taken up metallurgy to support his growing family. My mother, she passed shortly after I was born. I don't remember a lot about her. Only a single frame of her smiling down at my infant self remains in my memory to this day. Among the many things my father keeps from me, like the stories of his past as a soldier, it's the things about my mother that I yearn for the most. Now, with the Empire's forges heating up as the ceasefire with Esther in the east seemed to be smoldering, my greatest fear is a conscription from Orleth sending its fetid claws to our neck of the woods, the Empire reclaiming its property. One never truly leaves the Empire. Mal. I hated the whole thing. All of it, could do without any of it. Why did the Empire have to keep sending its people to death in these endless fights over conflicts that don't ultimately matter? Why must our fathers be forced to work for the blood machine that is never satiated? Malachi. My father's voice brings me back to focus. I'm standing in front of a black cloud billowing up toward the ceiling. I sighed. Ah, shoot. Nearly start a fire and the most you let out with is shoot. I'd hate to hear what comes out if someone guts you like a fish. I'm sorry, I said. My father, the soldier. My father's eyes slide over to me with an imperceptible annoyance. He sighs as well. The thoughts of my past spill out as the smoke replaces it. The aroma is of charred muska rib which brings tears to my eyes. Sorry, was caught up on things. I've been thinking a lot lately. I push open the window to let the stale kitchen air out. As the warm morning light spills in, it bathes the kitchen in a golden glow, contrasting the potential reprimand I was about to receive. I know it's not been easy, my father says with a sigh. His shoulders slump as he crosses the kitchen in a few quick strides. Tension's been rising out there, and you're finding ways to cope. I get it. But you must keep your attention on the food while you're cooking it. We don't need a repeat of last time. I may have accidentally started a fire, twice. I feel horrible about it. My mind sometimes just wanders. And if it becomes disconnected, it becomes harder to get back to where I should be. I was admittedly too young to be working the ovens the last time it happened. That must have been, 7 or 8 years ago now. I'm not going to let that happen again, I'm sorry, I said, grabbing the spike and using it to lift the charred remains of meat out of the pan. I lifted the entire pot out of the oven, nearly losing it as I leaned in closer to save it. I'll go out and catch some more grub. My father sighs and shakes his head. It's no bother. We've got some in the back. I can go grab it, provided you don't char this one. I move to answer, but a knocking at our front door steals both of our attention. Tell them we're not open for another hour. My father barks as he moves back to the refrigeration unit. Through my exhale, I set the spike down and open the door. Hello, is this the residence of Malachi End? The man that stands before me is shorter than I expected, but I can tell from the lines on his face he must have been at least 3 times my age. His dirty blonde hair is cut in an arc around his head, and if I hadn't recognized the imperial regalia on the chest of his coat, I might have let out a small laugh at how unfitting his proportions are to his hair. The moment my eyes cross the crimson lion with the orb meant to represent the sun within its jaws, my heart sinks. What is he doing here? Are you mute, boy? Am I in the right place to find Malachi End? He's right here. My father's voice saves me from finishing my thought, and instantly I regret how I couldn't save him. He appears behind me, resting his hand on the door frame as he looks out over my head to the man below. The tension is palpable when his gaze sets on the Imperial. To what do I owe the pleasure of a house call? The man's steely gaze never wavers as he extends a sealed letter bearing the Imperial emblem. My apologies if I've interrupted your morning. I bear a message from Emperor Eugolius himself. He wishes to see you, Malachi End, at the earliest convenience. The contents of this letter may shed some light on the urgency of the matter. My father takes the letter, the edges of his mouth barely curling upward as he recognizes the seal. I see. Thank you. I will read it immediately. As he starts to unseal the letter, the man adds, The Emperor requests your presence without delay, so I kindly advise haste in reviewing the contents. With a nod, my father breaks the seal and starts to read the letter. His eyes move quickly across the page, and it's clear that he's processing the words with great concentration. After a few moments, he lowers the letter, his expression unreadable. My father glances at me, his eyes holding a mixture of uncertainty and concern. I would most certainly love to discuss the details of this outside of this musty environment you cling to. The Imperial rubbed his fingers in distaste. We rarely get visitors from the Empire because they don't tend to like the change in elevation. If you spend enough time on the surface, entering Khadenite can really mess with your insides. At least, according to my father. The rare guests who do make the journey often bear the telltale signs of discomfort. My father hesitates a moment and sighs deeply, bowing into the kitchen, and clicks his tongue once, a signal I take to follow and let the Imperial inside. He throws the musker legs he'd been holding onto the countertop, and the meat sizzles softly as it lands on the cool surface. Tend to this, Malachi, he says, his voice strained. I sense a creeping sense of unease crawling up my back, holding my shoulders tight as I try to focus on the meat. I know that if I'm caught snooping, it will only make things worse, so I concentrate on the task at hand, trying to drown out the conversation but unable to stop my curiosity from getting the better of me. Both my father and the Imperial move to the family room. We don't have any doors to separate it from the kitchen, but they are past the wall, so I have to strain to listen. The low murmur of their voices drifts toward me, but I can't quite make out the words. I told you and all of them back there I was done. There's no more left to give. I'm out of that business. My father's voice is kept to a hush. I understand your desire to retire, but a soldier is not what we need, and you should consider yourself lucky that we're not here for that kind of call. Lucky? You want me to thank you, after everything? My father's voice quivers with a mix of anger and bitterness. Lucky is not something many people are these days, Malachi. I think you'll find that you should want to hear what we need because I'm trying very hard to keep your luck going. I hope you understand my drift. I finish scraping the burnt remains out of the pan and place them in a small bowl. My fingers work with precision as I season the meat, the fine grains of salt and pepper clinging to its surface. The sizzle of the meat hitting the hot pan is a satisfying sound, and the enticing scent of searing meat begins to fill the kitchen. The crackling of the meat as it cooks is a constant background noise, the aroma growing richer and more mouth-watering with each passing minute. It's not enough to pull me from the conversation beyond the wall. Quite a pup you've managed to raise, all things considered, the Imperial remarks, and my thoughts shift from concern to confusion. What kind of person has the audacity to enter another man's home and talk so flagrantly over things he knows nothing about? However, I'm uncomfortable considering that maybe I was incorrect in that assertion. It seems my father and this Imperial know each other very well, adding to the list of questions about my father's past. "Speak of nothing but your duty," my father spits out. "What is it you're here for, then? Hurry, before I rake out that tongue of yours." "Threats are only such if the threatened considers them serious. I know you're not capable of following up on those words, because that would surely cause much disturbance for your space here, no?" He waits a moment longer and then continues. I hate to imagine what my father's face looks like to a retort like that. "Emperor Eugolius is requesting a sword from the finest swordsman he knows, and you should be so lucky to be that very person. Surely there are better smiths in the empire?" The dimly lit room is shrouded in an aura of palpable tension, thick enough to be sliced with a blade. My father stands beside the kitchen counter, his fingers tracing the worn edge of the counter as he listens intently to the Imperial's words. In the background, a pan crackles and hisses with charred meat, its aroma mingling with the growing uncertainty in the room. "Ah, but you contain the special quality of knowing what kind of qualities makes for an effective weapon, more than any two-bit smith looking to work a rags to riches job. We're looking to cut out the process of eventually working our way down to you, not to mention that special metal of yours that we've been ever so kind to let you borrow." The Imperial, a figure of authority and power, leans in closer to my father. His arms remain tightly clasped behind him as he speaks. Crimson eyes bore into my father, conveying a sense of importance. There's a calculated sternness in his voice as he addresses the matter at hand. I can't help but feel drawn to the clandestine conversation. I take a cautious step closer, keeping to the shadows as I observe the exchange between my father and the Imperial. The room's flickering candlelight casts elongated shadows, adding to the overall mystique of the encounter. "There's none left." My father's words, though quiet, resonate with determination, hovering in the air like an unresolved chord in a somber melody. The Imperial's stern laugh breaks the silence, reverberating in the confined space. The room seems to tighten its grip as the Imperial laughs, underscoring the gravity of their discussion. His crimson eyes remain fixed on my father, and there's a tangible pressure in the atmosphere. A question hangs heavy in the air, like a sword poised to strike. My father finally asks, "What sort of sword is our dear Emperor looking to have made?" I discreetly observe, noticing the complex history that lingers between the two men. The Imperial's lips curl into a subtle, knowing smile. He leans back slightly, as if acknowledging the weight of my father's reputation. His words are laced with a blend of courtesy and authority, further deepening the intrigue of their exchange. The room appears to constrict as the two men continue their discussion. It feels as though the walls themselves are privy to an unspoken secret, making my presence all the more inconspicuous. A brief flicker of discomfort crosses the Imperial's face at the mention of the Emperor, but he swiftly composes himself. "I yearn not for Yuge's praise." My father's response carries a touch of defiance, making it evident that earning the Emperor's favor holds little appeal for him. The Imperial's gaze remains locked on my father, and for an ephemeral moment, an emotion akin to pain flickers across his features before being concealed by a mask of professionalism. They're like old acquaintances with a history too intricate to discern fully. "So be it," the Imperial responds, breaking the silence, and his tone hints at a veiled agreement. The room seems to hang in suspended animation, caught in a web of secrecy and uncertainty. "Will one of your men be sent to pick up the sword once it's complete? He really trusts that it will not be absconded in the interim?" My father inquires, his voice revealing a hint of concern. The Imperial's laughter fills the room, a fuller and heartier sound that clashes with the tension that has been building. His confidence in the success of his plan is unmistakable. The announcement he makes next catches me off guard, prompting me to step forward, an objection tumbling from my lips. The Imperial's crimson eyes bore into me, his gaze as piercing as daggers. My father attempts to restore order by urging me to return to my station, but the room is becoming increasingly chaotic. However, I'm undeterred. Well, the pup has decided to join us after all. Well, Logrith, he's what, 17 now? Surely he has a voice in the matter now. The Imperial's attention shifts to me, and I feel the weight of the room's focus on me. He is not to be involved in this situation. My father's voice is firm, and he directs a deep stare at the Imperial. Within the kitchen, the sizzling pan continues its culinary orchestration, but it is overshadowed by the crescendo of emotions beyond the wall. The Imperial, undeterred by my father's protests, continues to question me. Well, pup, I'm sure you know I hail from Emperor Eugolius himself. I'm curious why you think this job shouldn't be done. I swallow hard, the room's atmosphere becoming increasingly stifling. My inner turmoil is inescapable, with the conflicting voices of fear and determination waging war within me. The shadows seem to close in, but I find the strength to speak. Because my father cannot make the journey. He's got a limp and wouldn't make the trip off of Khadein. There's no way he can deliver this sword. My voice wavers, but my resolve remains unbroken. My words hang in the air, a declaration of my unwavering stance. The room falls into silence, and the Imperial's scrutinizing eyes assess me. My father's gaze shifts between me and the Imperial, his own inner struggle apparent. The cane propped against the wall offers a silent testament to my father's physical limitations, and it seems to trigger a moment of understanding in the Imperial. I see, well then, pup. What will you do about that? The Imperial's response is cryptic, a subtle test of my determination. He will do not dash. My father begins, but the Imperial interjects before he can finish. Logrith, the pup has shown himself capable of barking. The room seems to squeeze the air from my lungs, my legs threatening to give way beneath me. A bead of sweat forms on my forehead as I try to find my voice amidst the turmoil. I will go in his stead. This was the answer he was looking for, I'm sure of it. Given the circumstances, it made sense. But I hate how this situation put us both at the Empire's beck and call. Malachi, no. You're going to do no such thing. Vago, you've gotten your fun. I will have the sword delivered, and that will be that. The atmosphere in the room grows more stifling with every passing moment. My father, resolute in his decision to deliver the sword, appears agitated by the prospect of involving me. I can sense the weight of our predicament, how it has placed us at the mercy of the Empire, gnawing at him. I catch a glimpse of the Imperial, Vago, as he taps his fingertips together, his gaze calculating and ever so slightly malicious. His words are laced with a veiled amusement, relishing in the discomfort of our situation. The dimly lit room accentuates the tension as he speaks. You see, therein lies the stickiness. Vago's words hang in the air, almost tangible. His hands move with measured precision as he addresses my father, making it clear that time is of the essence. His mention of Emperor Eugolius's strict 2-month deadline underscores the urgency of our predicament. My father's voice drips with exasperation and frustration. You've given us only a month to fulfill your insane demands? Vago, undeterred by my father's anger, assumes a haughty expression. He places his hands on his sides and levels a disdainful look at our modest abode, seemingly repulsed by our living conditions. The room amplifies the tension, making Vago's veiled insults even more pronounced. The Imperial's condescending remarks continue, marked by disdain. He glances at the patches on our ceiling, remnants of last month's storm, and offers unfiltered criticism. Really quite dreadful, he mutters. My father's patience wears thin, and he forges ahead, his voice seething with indignation. You can't seriously. Vago interrupts, adopting a sardonic tone. Oh, the Empire seriously. The room reverberates with the weight of our impending obligation. His mention of payment and punishment looms ominously, like a storm cloud casting a shadow over our lives. The Imperial's attention shifts to the musker leg, left sizzling in the pan. He seizes the opportunity to assert his dominance, his gloved hand reaching for the meat. The act seems to mark a point of no return, emphasizing the power the Empire now holds over us. I reach out in anger, but my father stops me with an outstretched arm. He didn't turn to face me, his eyes still staring at Vago. I could tell though his look was to the both of us. Don't push your luck any further. Vago smiles the look of a weasel and departs from our home, the sound of the door closing taking the tension of the meeting and replacing it with the horror of all that was to be. A month to make a sword and deliver it crossed Oralithian borders? It took them a month to make it here, although I doubt they were traveling at their absolute fastest, probably trying to see how many hours they could burn. My father stands frozen, his eyes locked onto the door through which Vago exited, as if contemplating a bleak horizon. His arm, once tense, falls limply to his side, and he becomes a statue of contemplation. The oppressive silence in the room seems like an impenetrable fortress, and I dare not be the one to shatter its walls. Finally, my father speaks, his voice heavy with reproach. It was a foolish thing to do, boy. A tremor runs through me, but I refuse to back down. I couldn't let you take that job, you would have died on the way down. His response is stern, reminding me of his role as the protector. It was not your place to say. My chest constricts with the weight of unsaid words, and I'm compelled to reveal my innermost fears. If I remain silent, the burden will become too great to bear. I can't lose you. The admission startles my father. His eyebrows twitch ever so slightly, betraying his expectation that I'd argue about my readiness. In a rush of emotions, I speak of things I've kept hidden for years. I have always wished I could have saved Mom. The word feels foreign on my tongue, and the room seems to hold its breath as I utter it. I think about her nightly. I think about the stories she used to tell me, and I wonder what quest I could have embarked upon to bring her back. I can't go through that loss again. It would break me. My father's silence stretches, and I can sense the turmoil inside him. I wish he would reciprocate and share his thoughts. The dam has been breached, and the words spill forth uncontrollably. I want to save you. I want to hear the stories you haven't told me, and if you go out there, they die with you. Mom dies with you. My father continues to gaze at me with a piercing intensity. The lines on his face reveal a struggle within, a battle between his paternal instincts and his knowledge of the world's harsh realities. He finally closes his eyes and sighs, surrendering to my unspoken plea. Grab my junk sword from the back, he instructs. You're going to need to go out and find more food. Try to gather some Kaiser shells while you're at it. We'll need them for the hilt. Father, I say, exasperated, my voice barely above a whisper in our small, cluttered home. Obey your father's command and do not return until you've procured them, he orders, the weight of his words heavy with a worry he can't quite express. His voice trembles slightly as he speaks, and I sense that the whirlwind of events has taken its toll. I can't remain rooted in one place for too long. There's a growing restlessness inside me, a relentless tug of responsibility that's come far too fast. As I trail behind him, I pass by his entry into the only forbidden room in our small home, a place that's remained closed off for years. It's a stark contrast to the days when I would sit on his lap in his grand chair, enthralled by the tales of adventure from long ago. I wonder if that old chair even still exists, or if it's been dismantled and sacrificed to make ends meet. The junk sword, a relic of long-forgotten battles, rests in its corner, a somber reminder of the challenges that await me. Its blade, once gleaming with the valor of its past, now appears tarnished and neglected. The dim light that filters through the room casts a sinister glint upon the blade, mirroring the grim task that lies ahead. As I grip the hilt, I can feel the roughness of its once majestic surface, a texture that mirrors the worn and battered state of the sword. The pommel, heavy and unyielding, serves as an anchor, grounding me in the harsh reality of the perilous world beyond our safe haven. With each step I take while carrying the sword, it feels like a burden, a constant reminder of our family's predicament. The blade's weight digs into my shoulder, a relentless reminder of the responsibility I now carry. I ensure that the clasp securing the sword sheath is tightly fastened, signifying my readiness to embark on my journey. As I step outside, Khadean stirs to life around me. The town awakens with merchants setting up their stalls, the cheerful laughter of children echoing through the streets, and the gentle hum of daily existence filling the air. The sun ascends higher into the sky, its warm rays piercing through the towering buildings, casting dappled patterns on the cobbled streets. The clinking of the junk sword against my back creates a stark contrast to the lively scene, a dissonant note in the symphony of life. It serves as a poignant reminder that beyond our cozy sanctuary lies a world where survival often hinges on the sharpness of a blade and the unwavering spirit of its wielder. With a deep breath, I acknowledge that it's time for a hunt.